The invitation said black tie, but for Elaine, the reunion felt more like a summons to an execution. Everyone remembers high school, but nobody forgets a bitter divorce, especially when your ex-husband is Carter, a man who built his entire ego on making others feel small. He promised to ruin her night. He promised to show everyone that she was nothing without him. He didn't know that the quiet, reserved woman walking into the ballroom wasn't the same broken girl he left 5 years ago. And he certainly didn't know about the man parking a custom Bentley Continental GT outside, a man who could buy Carter's entire existence with pocket change. Tonight wasn't just a reunion, it was a reckoning. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse suite atop the Four Seasons in downtown Seattle. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and grey, mirroring the turmoil in Elaine's mind. She held the heavy cardstock envelope in her hand, the embossed silver lettering glinting under the chandelier's soft light. 10-year reunion. Class of 2015. The Fairmont Olympic Hotel. It wasn't just an invitation. It was a reminder of a life she had worked tirelessly to scrub from her memory. "You've been staring at that piece of paper for 20 minutes. A deep, steady voice came from the doorway. Elaine didn't need to turn around to know Sebastian was there. His presence was always like a grounding force, a calm anchor in her often chaotic internal world. She felt his hands rest gently on her shoulders, his thumbs rubbing away the tension gathering at the base of her neck. "Carter is going to be there," Elaine whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the climate control and the distant city noise. Sebastian paused. He knew the name. He knew the history. He knew that before Elaine had become the confident, radiant woman who organized charity galas for the Metropolitan Museum and sat on the board of 3 non-profits, she had been Carter's wife. Or rather, Carter's victim. "The man who told you that you'd never amount to anything more than a waitress?" Sebastian asked, his tone devoid of anger but heavy with a dangerous kind of protection. "The man who divorced you because he said you were holding back his potential?" "That's the one," Elaine sighed, leaning back into Sebastian's embrace. "I heard through the grapevine, Sophie told me, that he's been bragging on the alumni Facebook page. Apparently, he's a regional manager for a logistics firm now. He's telling everyone he's going to show up in a Porsche and that he's bringing a model." Sebastian chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated against her back. "Regional manager. Impressive. And you're worried because—" "I'm not worried about his success, Sebastian. I'm worried about his mouth. He knows how to get under my skin. He knows my insecurities. When we were married, he made me feel like I was invisible, like I was lucky he even looked at me." She turned in his arms, looking up into his steel-grey eyes. "I don't want to go there and feel small again." Sebastian brushed a stray lock of chestnut hair behind her ear. He was dressed in a simple charcoal sweater and dark denim, but even in casual wear, he radiated power. As the CEO of Vanguard Global, a private equity firm that quietly owned substantial stakes in half the technology sector, Sebastian didn't need to brag. He didn't have a Facebook page. He didn't post photos of his cars. He simply existed, and the world adjusted around him. "Elaine," he said softly, "you are not the same woman. You built your own art curation business from the ground up before we even met. You are brilliant, kind, and incredibly strong. If you want to stay home, we can order takeout from Canlis and watch old movies. But if you want to go, you should go. Not to prove anything to him, but to prove to yourself that he doesn't hold the pen to your story anymore." Elaine looked at the invitation again. She thought about the last time she saw Carter. It was in a small lawyer's office in Tacoma. He had thrown the pen across the table after signing the papers, telling her she'd be back begging for him within a year. 5 years had passed. She hadn't begged. She had flourished. "I want to go," Elaine decided, a spark of defiance igniting in her chest. "But I don't want to make a scene. I don't want to walk in on your arm and have everyone whisper that I married for money. I want to go as me. Just Elaine." Sebastian raised an eyebrow. "You want to go alone?" "Just for the first hour," she negotiated. "I want to face him. I want to see if I can stand in the same room as him without crumbling. If I walk in with you, everyone will just look at the billionaire husband. I need to know that I'm enough on my own." Sebastian studied her face for a long moment. He didn't like the idea of leaving her unprotected, especially with a man like Carter, who sounded emotionally volatile. But he respected her autonomy more than anything. "Fine," Sebastian agreed. "But I'll be nearby. I have a meeting with the Port Authority directors nearby anyway. I'll come by around 9 p.m. If he says one word out of line before I get there." "I can handle Carter," Elaine said, though her stomach twisted with a mixture of nerves and determination. "I just need to find a dress that says, 'I'm happy,' without screaming, 'I'm wealthy.'" "Wear the emerald silk," Sebastian suggested, kissing her forehead. "It matches your eyes, and it looks like armor." The Fairmont Olympic Hotel was a landmark of Seattle luxury, its grand lobby dripping with crystal chandeliers and mahogany detailing. The class of 2015 reunion was being held in the Spanish Ballroom, a venue that smelled of expensive perfume and old money. Elaine handed her coat to the attendant. She had taken an Uber to the venue, sticking to her plan of keeping things low-key. She wore the emerald silk dress Sebastian had suggested. It was elegant, a vintage Halston she'd picked up in Paris, but to the untrained eye, it was just a simple green dress. She wore no jewelry other than her wedding band, a simple platinum band she often wore instead of the massive 6-carat diamond Sebastian had given her, specifically for days she wanted to do volunteer work without drawing attention. As she walked toward the double doors, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses grew louder. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "You are strong. You are loved. You are safe." She pushed the doors open. The room was packed. Round tables draped in white linen filled the center, while a buffet lined the far wall. A DJ was playing a remix of a top 40 hit from 2015, instantly transporting everyone back to their senior year. "Elaine?" The voice was high-pitched and sharp. Elaine turned to see Sarah, her old lab partner. Sarah was holding a glass of cheap white wine, her eyes scanning Elaine's outfit with critical precision. "Hi, Sarah. It's been a long time." Elaine smiled, trying to be genuine. "It has." Sarah leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I honestly didn't think you'd come. I heard about the divorce. That must have been devastating. Carter was always the one with the big plans, wasn't he?" The backhanded compliment landed softly, but Elaine felt the prick. "Divorce is never easy, Sarah, but it was for the best. I'm doing really well now." "Oh, good for you," Sarah said, her tone suggesting she didn't believe it. She glanced at Elaine's ring finger, spotting the plain band. "Remarried, or just a promise ring?" "Married," Elaine said simply. "That's sweet. Is he local?" Sarah asked, clearly fishing for status. "He is." Before Sarah could probe further, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It was a subtle change at first, heads turning toward the entrance, the volume of conversation dipping. Elaine followed the gaze of the room. Carter had arrived. He stood in the doorway, posing as if waiting for paparazzi that would never come. He had gained a little weight, his face puffier than she remembered, but he hid it well under a tailored navy suit that looked expensive from a distance, but shone a little too much under the lights. Polyester blend, likely, On his arm was a woman who looked no older than 22. She was wearing a dress that was more sequins than fabric, and she looked bored, tapping away on her phone. Carter scanned the room, a predatory grin spreading across his face as he recognized people. He high-fived the old football quarterback. He laughed too loudly at a joke from the class president. He was performing. Elaine turned away, hoping to blend into the crowd near the bar, but it was too late. Carter's radar for her was uncanny. It was as if he could sense her discomfort. "Well, well, well," his voice boomed from behind her. Elaine froze, took a deep breath, and turned around. "Hello, Carter." Carter looked her up and down, his eyes lingering on her simple dress and the lack of ostentatious jewelry. He smirked, a look of vindication crossing his face. "I see the years haven't been too kind to the bank account, huh, Elaine?" He gestured to her dress with his glass of whiskey. "Thrift store find. It's quaint." The girl on his arm looked up from her phone, popped her gum, and looked Elaine over with disdain. "Is this the ex?" "This is her, babe," Carter said, draping an arm around the girl's waist. "Elaine, this is Crystal. Crystal is a model. Just got back from a shoot in Cabo." "Instagram model," Crystal corrected. "But yeah." "Nice to meet you, Crystal," Elaine said politely. She looked back at Carter. "I'm just here to catch up with a few friends, Carter. I don't want any trouble." "Trouble? Who said anything about trouble?" Carter laughed, stepping closer, invading her personal space. The smell of expensive cologne mixed with stale whiskey wafted off him. "I'm just catching up, too. It's important to see where everyone landed. I mean, look at me. Regional manager. Just bought a new condo in Bellevue, driving a Porsche Cayenne. Life is good, Elaine. Life is really good." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a sneer. "And look at you, still playing the quiet little mouse. Did you marry some mechanic? Or maybe a teacher? Someone who can help you clip coupons?" Elaine felt the heat rise in her cheeks. It wasn't shame. It was anger. "My husband is a good man, Carter. That's all that matters." "A good man," Carter mocked, loudly enough that the people at the nearby tables turned to watch. "That's code for broke. God, I knew you'd fail without me. I told you, didn't I? I told you that you needed someone with vision to guide you. You cut the anchor, Elaine. And look, you're drifting." "I'm happy, Carter," Elaine said firmly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. "Please excuse me." She tried to step around him, but he sidestepped to block her path. "Don't run away, Elaine. We haven't even gotten to the speeches yet. I put my name down to say a few words to the class. You'll want to hear it. It's about success and how to identify dead weight in your life." The cruelty in his eyes was naked now. He wasn't just bragging. He wanted to hurt her. He wanted to use this audience to retroactively justify how poorly he had treated her during their marriage. "Let me pass," Elaine said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. "Or what?" Carter laughed. "You going to call your good man to come pick you up in his Honda Civic?" "Hey, is there a problem here?" a voice interrupted. It was Jason, a guy Elaine barely knew from math class, stepping in hesitantly. Carter turned on him, his aggression flaring. "Mind your business, Jason. Just catching up with the ex-wife," reminding her of what she walked away from. Elaine seized the moment to slip past him, her heart pounding. She headed straight for the balcony doors, needing fresh air. She stepped out into the cool Seattle night, gripping the railing. Her hands were shaking. She looked at her watch. 8:15 p.m. Sebastian wouldn't be here for another 45 minutes. Inside, through the glass, she saw Carter holding court at the center table. He was pantomiming something, likely a story about her, and the sycophants around him were laughing. He pointed toward the balcony where she stood, and a ripple of laughter went through the group. He wasn't done. He was just getting warmed up. Elaine took her phone out of her clutch. She opened her messages and typed to Sebastian. "It's worse than I thought. He's hostile." 3 dots appeared instantly. "I'm leaving the meeting early," Sebastian replied. "ETA 20 minutes. Hold your ground, Elaine. Do not let him see you bleed." She took a deep breath of the crisp air. She wouldn't leave. If she left now, Carter won. He would tell the story of how he chased her off for the rest of his life. She turned back toward the glass doors. She was going back in there, but she had no idea that Carter had arranged a little surprise for the slideshow presentation that was about to start. Elaine walked back into the ballroom, her chin held high. She refused to skulk in the shadows. She found her seat at table 9, a table near the back reserved for those who hadn't RSVP'd with a gold package ticket, another one of Carter's class stratification ideas for the reunion. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd as the projector screen descended from the ceiling. "All right, everyone, settle down." Carter's voice boomed over the microphone. He stood on the small stage, basking in the spotlight. "Before we get to the main course, which I personally selected, by the way, hope you enjoy the filet mignon, we have a little presentation." Elaine took a sip of water. Her hand was steady now. She checked her phone under the table. Sebastian. "Parking. 5 minutes. We all remember high school," Carter began, loosening his tie as if he were a talk show host. "We remember the dreams we had. Some of us wanted to be astronauts, some wanted to be doctors, and some—" He paused for dramatic effect, his eyes scanning the dark room until they landed on table 9. "Some of us just wanted to find a rich spouse to take care of us." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. "But reality hits hard, doesn't it?" Carter continued, clicking a remote. The screen lit up with a montage of photos from 2015, prom photos, football games, candid cafeteria shots. It was nostalgic, sweet even. Then the slide changed. The header read, "Success Stories." A massive photo of Carter appeared. It was clearly staged, him standing in front of a generic glass office building, arms crossed, wearing a headset. Underneath, bullet points listed his achievements. Regional Sales Director, top 10% earner, Porsche Club member. "I don't mean to toot my own horn," Carter said, clearly meaning to do exactly that. "But hard work pays off. I built my life from scratch. I didn't wait for handouts." He clicked the remote again. The screen changed. The header read, "Reality Checks." Elaine's heart stopped. On the screen was a photo of her from 3 years ago. It was a candid shot taken from a distance, likely by one of Carter's friends. In the photo, Elaine was wearing a stained apron, looking exhausted, wiping down a table at a diner. It was during the lowest point of her life, right after the divorce, when Carter had drained their joint accounts, and she was working 2 jobs just to pay rent on a studio apartment while building her art curation portfolio at night. A gasp went through the room. It wasn't malicious. It was shocked. "Now, I don't show this to be mean," Carter said, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. "I show this as a lesson. Elaine, where are you? Stand up." The spotlight swung around, blinding Elaine. She didn't stand. She sat frozen, her knuckles white as she gripped the tablecloth. "There she is," Carter pointed. "Elaine here was my wife, and I loved her, but she didn't have the drive. She was content with mediocrity. And when you settle for mediocrity, this is where you end up, cleaning tables while the rest of us are closing deals." "That's enough, Carter," a voice rang out. It was Oliver, the former class president. He stood up at table 1. "This is inappropriate." "Sit down, Oliver," Carter snapped, his jovial mask slipping. "I paid for the open bar tonight. I get to speak. I'm trying to help you all see the truth." Elaine walked away from me. She walked away from success. And look at her now, wearing a dress from a thrift bin, showing up here alone, probably hoping one of you successful guys will pity her. Carter leaned into the microphone, his eyes locking onto Elaine's. "Tell them, Elaine. Tell them how you came to my office last year asking for a loan. Tell them how desperate you were." It was a lie. A bold fabrication. Elaine had never gone to his office. She had blocked his number the day the divorce was finalized. The injustice of it burned in her throat. She slowly pushed her chair back and stood up. The room went silent. "I never asked you for a dime, Carter," Elaine said. Her voice wasn't loud, but in the silence of the ballroom, it carried. "And that photo? That was taken 3 years ago. I was working to pay for my certifications because you emptied our savings account before you left." Carter laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Oh, listen to her. The victim card. It's always someone else's fault, isn't it? Face it, Elaine. You're a cautionary tale. You're a nobody. You have nothing." He gestured to Crystal, who was snickering at the head table. "See, I upgraded. I won. You lost." Elaine looked around the room. She saw pity in the eyes of her former classmates. She saw Sarah whispering behind her hand. She felt the weight of their judgment, manufactured entirely by a man who needed to destroy her to feel tall. "I didn't lose, Carter," Elaine said, her voice trembling slightly with rage. "I survived you. That's a victory in itself." "Survived?" Carter sneered. "Look at you. You're shaking. You're pathetic. Why don't you go grab a tray and start clearing the tables? It's what you're good at." He turned to the DJ. "Cut the mic on her. Let's get some music back on. I'm done with the charity case." The humiliation was complete. Carter had painted her as a destitute, lying failure, and he had the microphone, the stage, and the loudest voice. Elaine grabbed her clutch. She wasn't going to cry in front of him. She turned to leave, head down, just wanting to escape the suffocating gaze of 200 people. She reached the double doors at the back of the ballroom, just as they swung open. But she didn't push them. They were pulled open from the outside by 2 flustered-looking hotel security guards. The music hadn't started yet. The room was still caught in the awkward, heavy silence following Carter's tirade. That silence deepened as the doors opened wide. First, the general manager of the Fairmont Olympic, a man named Mr. Henderson, hurried in. He looked pale, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. He was followed by the head of security. And then Sebastian walked in. He didn't stomp. He didn't rush. He moved with the fluid, predatory grace of a jungle cat entering a clearing. He was wearing a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo, midnight blue, peak lapel, that fit him as if it were a second skin. He had shed his wet coat outside, and not a drop of rain marred his appearance. On his wrist, a Patek Philippe Nautilus gleamed under the chandeliers, a watch worth more than Carter's new condo. But it wasn't the clothes, it was the energy. The air in the room seemed to be sucked toward him. He possessed a gravitational pull that only men who wield true, earth-shaking power possess. He stopped in the doorway, his steel-grey eyes sweeping the room in a single, terrifying second. He ignored the 200 people staring at him. He ignored the general manager hovering at his elbow. His eyes locked onto Elaine. Her face was pale, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears of frustration. Sebastian's jaw tightened. A muscle feathered in his cheek. It was the only sign of the volcanic rage erupting beneath his calm exterior. He stepped forward, reaching out and gently taking Elaine's hand. He brought it to his lips, kissing her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm late," he said, his voice a low baritone that carried effortlessly to the nearby tables. "My apologies, cara mia. The traffic on I-5 was unforgiving." Elaine let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "Sebastian, who is this?" Carter's voice blared over the speakers. He was still on stage, looking down at the newcomer with a mixture of confusion and annoyance. "Hey, buddy, this is a private event. Class of 2015 only. The staff entrance is through the kitchen." Carter laughed at his own joke, expecting the room to join in. No one did. Mr. Henderson, the general manager, looked as if he might faint. He frantically waved his hands at Carter to shut up, but Carter was too drunk on his own ego to notice. "I said," Carter shouted, stepping to the edge of the stage, "get out, or do you need me to call security? Elaine, did you call your boyfriend to come cry on his shoulder? Tell him to wait in the car." Sebastian slowly turned his head toward the stage. He didn't release Elaine's hand. He looked at Carter with the dispassionate curiosity of a scientist examining a particularly repulsive insect. "Mr. Henderson," Sebastian said, not raising his voice. The general manager practically snapped to attention. "Yes, Mr. Vanguard. Anything you need, sir. Anything at all." "Mr. Vanguard," someone at table 3 whispered. "Wait. Sebastian Vanguard." The whisper spread like wildfire. Vanguard. The name was synonymous with Seattle's skyline. Vanguard Global owned the building they were sitting in. They owned the logistics company Carter worked for. They owned the bank Carter had his mortgage with. Carter, however, was slow on the uptake. Vanguard? What kind of made-up name is that? Look, pal, I don't care who you think you are. I rented this ballroom. I'm the regional manager of Pacific Logistics, and I'm telling you to leave. Sebastian finally moved. He walked toward the stage, pulling Elaine gently with him. The crowd parted instantly, chairs scraping against the floor as people scrambled to get out of his way. He stopped at the base of the stage. He looked up at Carter. "Pacific Logistics," Sebastian repeated, his tone thoughtful. "Subsidiary of Orion Transport, which was acquired by Vanguard Global in Q4 of last year." Carter blinked. "What?" "I own your company," Sebastian stated simply. It wasn't a boast. It was a fact, stated with the same casualness as commenting on the weather. "And judging by your behavior tonight, I'd say HR has been incredibly lax in their vetting process for management." Carter's face went from flushed red to ghostly white in a heartbeat. The microphone slipped in his sweaty hand, creating a screech of feedback. You can't be. Sebastian Vanguard he's older. He's standing right in front of you," Sebastian finished. "And he is very displeased to see his wife being spoken to with such disrespect." "Wife?" Carter choked out. He looked at Elaine, then at Sebastian, then back at Elaine. The thrift store dress suddenly looked like the vintage couture it was. The lack of jewelry suddenly looked like quiet confidence rather than poverty. "Elaine is your wife," Carter stammered. "For 2 years, Sebastian said. He turned his back on Carter, dismissing him as a threat, and looked at the crowd. His gaze was cold. "I was under the impression this was a celebration. Instead, I walk in to find a man with a microphone bullying a woman who has more class in her little finger than he has in his entire lineage." The room was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Sebastian turned back to Elaine, his expression softening instantly. "Did he hurt you?" "Only my pride," Elaine whispered. "He showed them a picture of me working at the diner. He told them I was a failure." Sebastian nodded slowly. He looked back at Mr. Henderson. "Mr. Henderson, who paid for this event?" "Mr. Carter obtained the contract, sir," the manager squeaked, "though the payment is currently pending on a credit card hold. "Cancel it," Sebastian said. "Sir?" "Cancel the event. Refund everyone's tickets. I will cover the cost of the evening personally." Sebastian adjusted his cufflinks. "However, I will not be dining here, and neither will anyone who found my wife's humiliation amusing." He looked at the crowd. "If you laughed at those slides, I suggest you leave before I ask for a guest list and cross-reference it with my hiring database." Half the room looked ready to bolt. Carter, realizing his kingdom was crumbling, tried to salvage the situation. He scrambled down the stairs from the stage, approaching Sebastian with a desperate, shaky smile. "Look, Mr. Vanguard, sir, it was just a joke, a roast. You know how it is, old high school dynamics. I didn't mean any harm. Elaine knows that. We have a history. She gets my sense of humor. Right, Elaine?" Carter reached out to touch Sebastian's shoulder, a familiar buddy-buddy gesture. Sebastian's hand shot up, catching Carter's wrist in a grip of iron before he could make contact. He didn't twist, he didn't strike, he just held Carter's wrist in mid-air, squeezing slightly. Carter grimaced, his knees buckling under the pressure. "Do not," Sebastian said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper that only Carter and Elaine could hear. "Touch me, and do not speak her name again. You lost the right to speak to her when you decided her worth was tied to your bank account." He released Carter's wrist. Carter stumbled back, rubbing his arm, terror in his eyes. "Now," Sebastian said, smoothing his jacket, "we are leaving. But before we go, there is one matter of business regarding your employment at Pacific Logistics." Carter's eyes widened. "Please." "Sir, it's my career. I just bought the condo. I have payments." "You should have thought about that before you decided to use a company title to bully a woman," Sebastian said coldly. "But I'm not going to fire you, Carter." Carter let out a sob of relief. "Oh, thank you. Thank you. Firing you would be too easy," Sebastian said, a dark glint in his eye. "No, I have a much better idea for where your talents can be utilized." Sebastian stared at Carter, his expression unreadable, calm, and terrifyingly efficient. The silence in the Spanish ballroom was absolute. The earlier murmurs and snickers had evaporated, replaced by a tension so thick it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "You see, Carter," Sebastian began, his voice smooth. "Pacific Logistics has been struggling with a very specific problem in our supply chain. We have a remote facility in Deadhorse, Alaska. It's a critical junction for our oil pipeline equipment transport. It is cold, it is isolated, and the turnover rate for the on-site supervisor role is catastrophic." Carter's eyes widened. "Alaska? No. No, I can't move to Alaska. My life is here. My friends. Your condo in Bellevue," Sebastian interrupted. "The one you likely over-leveraged yourself to buy, to impress these people? I imagine the relocation package might help you keep up with the payments, although the cost of living in Deadhorse is significantly lower, mostly because there is nowhere to spend money." Sebastian took a step closer, lowering his voice so it felt like a physical weight pressing down on Carter's shoulders. "You mocked my wife for working with her hands. You mocked her for cleaning up. You claimed you value hard work and grit. So, I'm giving you an opportunity to prove it. The position in Deadhorse involves manual inventory management. Outside, in the elements. It pays the same as your current role, so you can't claim I'm ruining you financially. But your title of regional manager is revoked effective immediately. Your new title will be Senior Yard Associate." "I won't do it," Carter blustered, trying to regain a shred of dignity, looking around the room for support. "I'll quit. I'll sue for hostile work environment." "You can certainly quit," Sebastian agreed, checking his watch. But given that I own the parent company, and I sit on the board of the Regional Trade Association, I think you'll find your references lacking. And if you sue, my legal team is bigger than the population of the town I'm sending you to. They need the practice." Sebastian smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "So, Carter, do you want to be a senior yard associate in Alaska, or do you want to be unemployed in Seattle with a Porsche lease you can't afford?" Carter slumped. The fight drained out of him like water from a cracked vase. He looked at Crystal, the model on his arm. "Babe," Carter pleaded, "it's just for a year or two. We can make it work." "Long distance?" Crystal laughed. It was a harsh, sharp sound. She pulled her arm away from him as if he were contagious. "Alaska? Are you kidding me? I can't tag a location in Dead Horse. And you told me you owned the company, Carter. You said you were the CEO." "I said I was like a CEO," Carter argued. "Uber is outside," Crystal announced, looking at her phone. She looked at Elaine, then at Sebastian. A flash of envy crossed her face, followed by a shrug. "Nice dress, by the way," she said to Elaine, before turning on her sequined heel and marching out of the ballroom. The sound of the heavy doors closing behind her echoed like a gavel strike. Elaine watched Carter. She expected to feel triumph. She expected to feel a surge of vindication, seeing the man who had tormented her reduced to a shivering mess. But as she looked at him, sweating, pale, abandoned by his date, and terrified of his future, she felt nothing. The anger was gone. The fear was gone. He wasn't a monster anymore. He was just a small, sad man. "Sebastian," Elaine said softly, placing a hand on her husband's arm. "Let's go. He's not worth any more of our time." Sebastian looked down at her, the ice in his eyes melting instantly into warmth. "As you wish." He turned to the crowd one last time. His gaze swept over Sarah, Oliver, and the others who had laughed at the slideshow. "Enjoy your dinner," Sebastian said, his voice dripping with irony. "I believe the cash bar is now open, as I've instructed the manager to revoke the open tab. You all seem successful enough to pay for your own drinks." He offered his arm to Elaine. She took it, her head held high. As they walked back through the tables, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. But this time, the silence was broken. "Elaine, wait!" It was Sarah. She rushed forward, a desperate, sycophantic smile plastered on her face. "Elaine, I just wanted to say, I didn't know. About Carter. I mean, we all thought he was joking. You know how boys are. We should catch up properly. Maybe grab coffee next week. I'd love to hear about your art business. I actually need some pieces for my living room." Elaine stopped. She looked at Sarah, the woman who had whispered about her dress, who had asked if her husband was a mechanic, who had laughed when the photo of the diner appeared. "No, Sarah," Elaine said. Her voice was calm, devoid of malice but firm as steel. "What?" Sarah blinked, her smile faltering. "I don't sell art to people who measure respect by a bank account balance," Elaine said. "And I don't drink coffee with people who laugh at others' pain to make themselves feel taller. Enjoy the reunion. I won't be at the next one." Elaine turned away, leaving Sarah standing there with her mouth open. They walked out of the ballroom, past the stunned security guards, and into the cool marble lobby of the Fairmont. The air suddenly felt lighter. The suffocating weight of the past 5 years had lifted. The valet brought the car around, a pristine, silver Bentley Continental GT. The engine purred with a deep, throaty rumble that vibrated in the damp night air. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets of Seattle slick and reflecting the neon city lights like black mirrors. Sebastian opened the passenger door for Elaine. She slid into the cream leather seat. the smell of expensive hide and Sebastian's cedarwood scent wrapping around her like a cocoon. As Sebastian got into the driver's seat and pulled away from the curb, leaving the hotel and Carter's destroyed ego in the rearview mirror, silence filled the car. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was a processing silence. Elaine watched the city roll by. The Space Needle glowed orange in the distance. "You were terrifying back there," she said quietly, breaking the silence. Sebastian glanced at her, his hands relaxed on the steering wheel. "Too much? I can rescind the Alaska offer and just fire him, if you prefer." But I felt the poetic justice of the cold climate suited his personality. Elaine let out a short, breathless laugh. "No, it was appropriate. I've never seen you use your power like that. You're usually so subtle." "He hurt you," Sebastian said, his tone darkening slightly. "Subtlety is reserved for boardrooms and negotiations. When someone attacks my wife, I don't negotiate. I annihilate." He reached across the console and took her hand, interlacing their fingers. "Are you okay? Really?" "I think so," Elaine said. She looked at the passing street signs. They were heading south, away from their penthouse. "Where are we going?" "This isn't the way home." "I'm hungry," Sebastian said innocently. "And you didn't get to eat the rubbery chicken at the reunion." "I know a place." Elaine frowned slightly but trusted him. She leaned her head back against the seat, closing her eyes. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her exhausted. The image of the slide, her in the apron, looking tired and worn, flashed behind her eyelids. Is that how they all saw me? She wondered. As a failure? The car slowed down and turned into a gravel parking lot. The sudden change in texture under the tires made Elaine open her eyes. Her breath hitched. The neon sign buzzed overhead, a flickering red and blue. Joe's Diner. It was the place, the exact place from the photo. The place where she had worked double shifts, scrubbing floors and serving truckers, crying in the walk-in freezer when the lawyers sent her bills she couldn't pay. "Sebastian," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why are we here?" Sebastian put the car in park and turned off the engine. He turned to her, his expression serious and tender. "Because Carter tried to weaponize this place against you," he said. "He tried to make this place a symbol of your shame. He tried to tell you that the woman who worked here was less than." He unbuckled his seatbelt and turned fully toward her. "I want you to walk in there with me, not as the waitress who was struggling to survive, but as the woman who survived. I want you to reclaim it. The woman in that photo wasn't pathetic, Elaine. She was a warrior. She did what she had to do to build a life. I admire that woman more than I admire any CEO I've ever met." Tears pricked Elaine's eyes. "I hated this place," she confessed. "I felt so small here." "Then let's go make it big," Sebastian grinned. He came around and opened her door. Elaine stepped out, the gravel crunching under her heels, her expensive designer heels. They walked to the door. The bell chimed as they entered. Ding-ling. The smell hit her instantly. Stale coffee, bacon grease, and lemon cleaner. It was a visceral time machine. The diner was mostly empty, just a few truck drivers at the counter and a tired-looking teenager wiping down the tables. The teenager looked up. She had dark circles under her eyes and a name tag that was crooked. She looked exactly like Elaine had 5 years ago. She saw Sebastian in his tuxedo and Elaine in her emerald silk gown. Her eyes went wide. They looked like aliens who had crash-landed in a greasy spoon. "Hi," the girl stammered. Sit wherever you want. Menus are on the table." Elaine walked to the booth in the back corner, the booth where she used to sit on her break to study for her art history certification. She slid onto the red vinyl bench. It was cracked in the same place. Sebastian sat opposite her. He looked out of place, yet perfectly at ease. He picked up the sticky laminated menu. "I hear the cherry pie is legendary," he mused. Elaine laughed, wiping a tear from her cheek. "It's actually frozen, but the milkshakes are real." "2 milkshakes, then," Sebastian decided. The waitress came over, looking nervous. "Can I get you guys anything?" "2 vanilla milkshakes," Elaine said, smiling warmly at the girl. "And what's your name?" "Jenny," the girl said. "Jenny," Elaine said. "Are you studying?" Jenny blinked, surprised. She gestured to a textbook tucked under the counter. "Yeah, nursing school, night classes. It's a lot." "It's worth it," Elaine said intensely. "Don't let anyone tell you it's not. Keep going." Jenny smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "Thanks." As Jenny walked away to make the shakes, Sebastian reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a folded document. He slid it across the table to Elaine. "What is this?" she asked. "I didn't just bring you here for the milkshakes," Sebastian admitted. "I made a purchase last week. I was waiting for your birthday, but tonight feels like the right time." Elaine unfolded the paper. It was a property deed. Owner, Elaine Vanguard. Property, 4055, Highway 99, commercial lot. Currently Joe's Diner. Elaine gasped. You bought the diner?" "I bought the land and the business," Sebastian said. "The owner was looking to retire. He was going to sell it to a developer who wanted to tear it down and build a parking lot." "Sebastian, what am I going to do with a diner?" she asked, laughing in disbelief. "Whatever you want," he shrugged. "Burn it down. Keep it running. Or—" He gestured to the walls, which were currently covered in faded posters of 1950s cars. "The lighting in here is actually quite good. The structure is brick, high ceilings. If you gutted the kitchen, put in skylights. It would make an incredible gallery for local artists, a place for people who are starting from nothing to show their work." Elaine looked around. She saw the grease and the grime, but suddenly she saw what Sebastian saw. She saw white walls. She saw sculptures where the jukebox stood. She saw a space of beauty rising from a place of struggle. "A gallery," she whispered. "The Resurrection Gallery." "Fitting," Sebastian smiled. "You are crazy," she said, leaning across the table to kiss him. "Completely crazy." "I'm in love," he corrected. "There's a difference." Jenny returned with the milkshakes. "Here you go." "Thank you, Jenny," Sebastian said. He pulled out his wallet and placed a $100 bill on the table. "Keep the change." "Sir, the shakes are only $12, she said, eyeing the bill. "Consider it a tuition grant," Sebastian said. As they sat there, sipping milkshakes in their formal wear, Elaine looked at the photo on the deed. She thought of Carter, shivering in his fear of Alaska. She thought of the friends at the reunion. And then she looked at the man across from her, who saw her worth when she had nothing, and who helped her build a world where she could be everything. The ghost of the sad waitress in the corner booth faded away, replaced by the vibrant, powerful woman sitting there now. "Ready to go home?" Sebastian asked after they finished. "Not yet," Elaine said, grabbing a napkin and a pen. "I have an idea for the layout of the main exhibition hall. If we knock out that wall—" Sebastian watched her sketch, a look of pure adoration on his face. The reunion hadn't broken her. It had just reminded her of how far she had climbed. 6 months later, the structure that once housed Joe's Diner was unrecognizable. The neon sign was gone, replaced by a sleek, backlit inscription in brushed steel. The Origin Gallery. It was the opening night of the season's most anticipated art event in Seattle. Valets were parking Ferraris and Teslas, where 18-wheelers used to idle. The interior, once smelling of grease, now smelled of champagne and fresh lilies. The walls were a stark, brilliant white, adorned with the works of underprivileged artists whom Elaine had personally scouted over the last half-year. Elaine stood in the center of the room, wearing a gown of shimmering gold. She looked like a queen holding court. She was no longer the woman who shrank away from judgment. She was the judgment. Mrs. Vanguard? A security guard, dressed far better than the bouncers at the Fairmont, approached her. There is a woman at the door claiming to be an old friend. She isn't on the list, but she's insisting. Elaine looked toward the glass entrance. Pressing her face against the door, waving frantically, was Sarah. Behind her stood Oliver and a few others from the Gold Package reunion group. They looked desperate. They had read about the gallery in the Seattle Times, seen the profile on Elaine in Vogue, and realized they had bet on the wrong horse. "She says her name is Sarah," the guard said. Elaine watched Sarah mouth the words. "Please, Elaine." Elaine took a sip of her sparkling water. She remembered the reunion. She remembered the Snickers. She remembered how Sarah had treated her like a contagion until she found out about the money. "Tell her," Elaine said calmly, "that the gallery is at capacity, but the public viewing hours are Tuesday mornings from 9 to 11. She can wait in line then." The guard nodded and turned away. Elaine watched as Sarah was turned away, the look of shock on her face priceless. It wasn't about cruelty, it was about boundaries. Elaine had learned that access to her life was a privilege, not a right. "Ruthless," a voice whispered in her ear. Elaine turned to see Sebastian, holding 2 flutes of vintage Dom Perignon. "I learned from the best." "I have one last update for you," Sebastian said, handing her a glass, "regarding our senior yard associate in the north." He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo sent by the site supervisor in Dead Horse. It was a bleak image. Snow swirled around a grey industrial yard. In the center, bundled in a heavy, high-visibility parka that looked 3 sizes too big, was Carter. He was holding a clipboard, his face red from the wind, looking miserable as he checked the serial numbers on a frozen pipeline valve. He tried to resign last week, Sebastian noted, but then he realized that with his credit rating tanked from the condo foreclosure, no landlord in Seattle would rent to him. So he stayed. He's actually becoming quite efficient at inventory. Apparently, the cold focuses the mind. Elaine looked at the photo. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just felt a sense of balance. The scales of the universe had righted themselves. Carter was finally experiencing the struggle he had mocked her for, while she was celebrating the success he said she'd never have. "I hope he finds himself up there," Elaine said, handing the phone back. "But I don't need to know about him anymore. He's just a ghost." "Agreed," Sebastian said, slipping the phone away. "To the future?" "To the future," Elaine smiled. She looked around the room. She saw Jenny, the waitress from the diner, whom Elaine had hired as an assistant curator while paying for her nursing school. Jenny was laughing with a famous sculptor, holding her own, looking confident. Elaine realized that revenge wasn't about destroying your enemies. It was about outgrowing them. It was about taking the bricks they threw at you and building a castle so high they could no longer see inside. She took Sebastian's hand, and together they walked toward the center of the gallery to make her speech, leaving the cold, the past, and the ghosts outside in the dark. In the end, the reunion that was meant to break Elaine became the catalyst for her greatest triumph. Carter believed that humiliation was a weapon he could wield freely, forgetting that true strength is forged in the fires of adversity. He judged Elaine by her past struggles, failing to see the resilience that defined her character. While he ended up freezing in the isolation of his own arrogance, Elaine built a legacy of warmth and opportunity, proving that the best revenge isn't noise or anger, it is simply thriving. The story of Elaine and Carter serves as a powerful reminder. Never let someone who can't see your value define your worth, and always remember that the person serving the table today might own the building tomorrow. Wow, what a journey for Elaine. If this story satisfied your craving for instant karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Have you ever encountered an ex or a frenemy who tried to make you feel small? Comment below with karma. If you believe that what goes around comes around, or share your own reunion horror stories, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We have a shocking drama coming up next week about a CEO who goes undercover as a janitor in his own company. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.